Hey guys, Ben here from BO Photography, and today we're doing a comparison video between the Nikon D750 versus the Nikon D850. Now, the reason we're doing this comparison video is because we had a viewer comment on one of our videos asking if we could do this. Here's what they wrote. They said, "Have you sold your Nikon D750? I want to upgrade to the D850, so can you please compare image quality with the D750 for weddings? Thanks." So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be looking at things such as the specs of these cameras, the ergonomics, the advantages the D850 has over the D750 and vice versa. We're also going to be looking at such things as different accessories you can get for these cameras, and of course the image quality, such as ISO performance and all of that stuff. So stay tuned. The first thing we're going to be looking at is the specs of these cameras. So let's go right into that, starting with the D850. The Nikon D850 sports a 35.9 by 23.9 millimeter full frame sensor, also being CMOS. It has a max resolution of 45.4 megapixels. It has 14-bit uncompressed RAW. It has a dust reduction system, and the memory cards it takes are XQD, SD, SDHC, and SDXC. The Nikon D850 also has a capability of using UHS-2 SD cards. Moving on, it has a 153-point autofocus system, 99 of those points being cross-type. This is the same autofocus system that comes from the D5. Now, its ISO sensitivity goes from 64 to 25,600 and can be extended to 32 to 102,400. The shutter on this camera is 30 seconds to 1/8,000th of a second. And finally, the weight of this camera is roughly around 2 pounds. Now, this camera is really amazing, and of course, it's not a camera for everybody. Not everybody needs 45 megapixels, and a little bit later, I'll explain why I went ahead and got this camera. But just to kind of sum up why I did get it in the first place, just to give you a little teaser, is because of the capability it does have with the RAW files. You have a large, medium, and small RAW option, which means that there is a medium RAW, which is equivalent to 25 megapixels, and then a small RAW, which is equivalent to somewhere around 11 to 12 megapixels. Now let's look at the Nikon D750. The Nikon D750 sports, once again, just like the D850, a 35.9 by 23.9 millimeter CMOS full frame sensor. The Nikon D750 also does 14-bit uncompressed RAW, and its card types is SD, SDHC, and SDXC. Although the Nikon D850 supports a UHS-2 card, the D750 does not. Moving on, the D750's autofocus system is a 51-point autofocus system, 15 of those points being cross-type. Now, that system, I believe, comes from the D4. Its ISO sensitivity goes from native 100 to native 12,800 and can be extended to 50 and to 51,200. And the shutter goes to 30 seconds and then goes up to 1/4000th of a second. And the weight of this camera comes a little bit over 1.5 pounds. Now, the Nikon D750 is an amazing camera, and in fact, the first reason I decided to buy this camera was because I needed a good low light stills camera. And at the time, this was one of the best cameras on the market, in the DSLR market especially, that could do amazing low light, even up to 12,800 ISO. Now, both of these cameras are amazing, but let me tell you something, specs aren't everything. Let's move on to our second category, which is going to be the ergonomics of these cameras. Now, both of these cameras are great when it comes to hand feel, okay? Both of them have an amazingly deep grip. That's one thing that every photographer should consider, is the grip. Some people have bigger hands, some people have smaller hands. For me, I kind of have small hands, so to have a nice deep grip works really well for me, so both of them have that. Now, on the D850 side, the ISO button placement is so much better compared to the D750. The D850 has it right above the shutter button. Now, why is this important to me? It's because this placement really helps it when I'm looking through the viewfinder and I'm trying to change my ISO. On the D750, I have to push a button on the back and then use my scroll. But on the D850, all I have to do is push a button on the top here and then use the scroll. Makes it really easy for me. Now, Again, the D850 has a bigger viewfinder, and for some people who don't have an electronic viewfinder, especially in the DSLR area, a bigger viewfinder can always be welcomed. After shooting with the D850 for a little bit, I realized that I got so used to the bigger viewfinder that when I looked through the D750, it just seemed weird to me. So that is an advantage of the D850 when it comes to looking through that viewfinder. Now both of these cameras have articulating screens, which means that they're not a flippy screen. They don't flip horizontally, but they do flip vertically. Now both of these cameras makes it really convenient when you have your camera above your head or below your chin so that you can see what you are actually shooting without having to come eye to camera level to see what is actually on the screen. One more thing that of course the D850 has that the D750 does not is the touchscreen. The touchscreen makes it really easy to scroll through your photos on the back of the screen, and of course if you need to change a few settings in your menus and stuff like that. I really like the ergonomics of both of these cameras, but we want to move on to the next section of this video, which is going to be the advantages of each camera over the other. Once again, we're going to start with the D850. Alright, now let's compare the Nikon D850 with the Nikon D750, starting with ISO. The Nikon D850 has a native ISO of 64, which means that while most cameras do 100 ISO natively, this camera goes even lower than that, which means you should see an improvement in dynamic range, and surely I did. Now, believe it or not, one ISO stop is kind of not that much, but it really does improve your images. I know when I first shot with this, I was impressed by ISO 64 because I thought that the images were more contrasty, and even the raw images were more contrasty as well. Now, this can extend to ISO 64, but in my opinion, the D850 beats it when it comes to it because it is native. Now, let's move on to the cards. The cards in this camera, it does support the XQD card, and it also supports the SD UHS-2 cards. Now, the UHS-2s have 300 megabits per second, and then you have the XQDs, which do 400 megabits per second. This camera can do extreme cards, but it can only take the UHS-1, which only go up to 95 megabits per second. The next advantage of this camera is the megapixels. This camera can do 45 megapixels total, but believe it or not, it does have, as I said earlier, the medium raw options and the small raw options. So if you don't want to shoot at the full resolution, you can shoot at those smaller resolutions and reduce the space that is up on your card. Now, the full 45 megapixel raw file will probably take up about 100 megabits of space, or 100 megabytes, excuse me. But on this camera, it will only be 24 megapixels, making the files about 29 or 30 megabytes. The next thing I want to talk about is the touchscreen. Now, while the D850 is one of the first Nikon cameras to implement this, along with the D5 and the D500, the D750 does not have a touchscreen, which, believe it or not, I didn't think I needed a touchscreen until I actually purchased this camera. It's really responsive and really incredible to use, and I'm very impressed with a lot of the things you can do with it, like touch focus and live view, going through your menus, scrolling through your images that you've taken already. It's really remarkable, and I love it. The final advantage the Nikon D850 has over the D750 is 4K video with the full frame sensor. Now, if you're a cinematographer, this is huge. Now, most cameras, including Canon, have a crop factor on their 4K video. Nikon is one of the first cameras to implement a full frame 4K video experience. However, do be aware that the Nikon autofocus system is kind of crappy in video mode, so you probably wouldn't go to this unless you're going to use manual focus. So if you're a cinematographer, just keep those things in mind. Now that we've compared the Nikon D850 to the Nikon D750, let's see the advantages of the Nikon D750 over the Nikon D850. Now let's compare the Nikon D750 to the Nikon D850. Why would this be a better camera for you compared to the D850? Let me start with this. The raw files on this camera are obviously going to be smaller because you're not having to pack so much information into them. This sports, like I said earlier, a 24 megapixel sensor, which automatically rules out the idea of having 100 megabyte files. Now, this makes it so convenient for when you're on the go and you have to do quick edits on your computer, whatever that may be. So it's really convenient to have smaller files, especially when you do lots of events such as weddings or any other event you can think of, maybe sports even. Next is consistent memory card format. What do I mean by that? I mean that this camera has 2 SD card slots. Now, why could that be important to a photographer? Well, I know that when I was in the decision to make a purchase of the D850, I was a little bit worried at the 2 format of different memory cards. But I realized that the D750 kind of had an advantage of that because it did indeed make it easier for when I was transferring the files to my computer. Now, of course, you can get an external reader for the XQD card and UHS-2 cards in this camera, but for me, it's just more convenient to have the same card format. Next, the Nikon D750 is lighter than the Nikon D850. Now, the Nikon D750 is pretty amazing because it compacts so much stuff in a small camera body. I know for me, when I'm doing events such as weddings, it's really important for me that my back is not aching all day long. And when you use a system such as the Hold Fast Moneymaker, it's important to know that you have light cameras that can get the job done and do it very well. Another reason you may want to buy the D750 over the D850 is because of the ISO performance of this camera. It's simply amazing. I've shot up to 12,800 and have gotten such clean files that I couldn't actually believe what I was looking at. The files on this camera are beautiful, and of course the D850 does have pretty good low light performance, but I do believe at equal ISOs the D750 is just slightly better. Finally, the biggest thing, or one of the biggest things that may put you in that spot to purchase this camera is, believe it or not, the pop-up flash. Right here, the pop-up flash is very important for some people. Some people actually use the pop-up flash for flash, while others may use it as a trigger. The Nikon D850 does not have a pop-up flash. Now, this is not to spark a debate whether a pop-up flash is professional or not. This is simply saying that sometimes you need that flash, and the D750 can accommodate you with that. Now, let's move on to the next thing I want to do, which is image quality. And when I say image quality, I'm mostly referring to the ISO performance. Now, as we go and check out these files, I'm not going to be talking, we'll just have some music and I'll show you from different ISO levels what these cameras can do and respectively compare them. Also, if you want to check out those raw files, I'll put them in the link below so you can check those out for your own and decide for yourself which one is better. Now, let me also make a note. The raw files you're about to see from the D850 are going to be the medium raw files. I decided so they can be more comparable optically, I'm going to use those medium raw files to show you what the graininess looks like at higher ISOs. Now, who are these cameras for? Let me tell you this. In our question earlier, they asked if they should get the D750 for weddings, and is it good for weddings? Yes, it is. In fact, I would recommend the D750 over the D850 for weddings, and let me tell you briefly why. This camera, like I said, is going to have smaller RAW files, it'll have amazing ISO performance, and it will shoot about 7 frames a second. You can get this whole package for about half the cost of the D850. Now, If you're doing more studio work, if you're doing more landscape work, if you're doing more things that require higher resolution, I would highly recommend the D850. But as our question asked earlier, if you want just a good camera for weddings that's going to get you through and get you professional, beautiful images, the D750 is sufficient enough. Guys, I hope you enjoyed our comparison video between the D850 and the D750. Remember to subscribe to our channel and like this video and share with your friends. We enjoy it when you comment on our videos as well, so please do that. And guys, as always, we'll see you in the next video.